90% of Chinese families own their own homes. Home ownership is prioritized to the highest degree in Chinese cultures. This is frequently celebrated as an unprecedented triumph of modern wealth creation. Western observers often point to this metric as proof that individual home ownership has outpaced Western capitalist economies. Yet, this masks profound structural pressures, extreme household debt, and a deeply rigid social mandate. To truly grasp what home ownership represents in China, we have to look past the headline and examine how real estate dictates daily life. Where property identity is most fiercely maintained is in its non negotiable role as a fundamental prerequisite for major life milestones. In contemporary urban culture, owning an apartment is widely considered an absolute necessity before young men can even consider marriage. Families view real estate not as a speculative luxury, but as a primary physical proof of a prospective groom's financial capability and social stability. This social pressure turns real estate acquisition into an intergenerational survival requirement rather than purely individual financial choice. To satisfy this marriage market requirement, families engage in a process known as pooling six wallets to secure a single urban down payment. Parents, paternal grandparents, and maternal grandparents combine their lifestyle savings to help a young couple build an apartment. This multi-generational financial sacrifice ties the entire family's economic fate directly to a single physical asset. While it keeps the national ownership rate exceptionally high, it strips older generations of their retirement liquidity and safety net. The foundational shift toward universal urban home ownership was jump-started by a massive privatization of state-owned housing in the late 90s. During this housing reform era, urban workers were allowed to buy their state-allocated work unit apartments at heavily subsidized nominal rates. That single policy decision transformed a nation of public tenants into property owners almost overnight. It created a legacy generation of urban homeowners who acquired property before market prices surged beyond reach. In rural regions, home ownership is maintained at nearly 100%, but it exists only under a completely different economic reality. Rural homes are built on collective village land that cannot be freely sold or mortgaged on the open commercial market. These properties provide essential physical shelter and ancestral roots for hundreds of millions of families. However, because these homes lack open market liquidity, rural owners remain asset rich on paper while lacking usable financial capital. Where the reality of home ownership is structurally lost is in the legal structure of land rights across the nation. Private citizens in China do not own the land underneath their buildings. They hold 70-year residential land use rights leased from the state. This means property ownership is effectively a long-term lease agreement rather than permanent unconditional freehold ownership. As early multi-decade land leases approach their universal windows, true long-term property sovereignty remains a complex legal battle. For younger urban workers, the lived benefits of home ownership are being rapidly lost to staggering financial friction and lifetime debt burdens. Price to income ratios in tier 1 megacities like Shanghai and Beijing historically reached some of the highest levels in the world. Young buyers who manage to enter the market must dedicate a massive portion of their monthly earnings to mortgage servicing. This dynamic leaves young professionals property rich on paper, yet severely constrained in their daily purchasing power and career flexibility. The economic reality of Chinese household wealth is dangerously concentrated in real estate compared to global averages. Chinese households hold roughly 70% of their total net worth in residential property far exceeding Western norms. This extreme concentration was driven by a lack of alternative high-yield domestic investment options like stocks or bonds. When real estate values stall or decline, millions of families face an immediate and terrifying threat to their entire life savings. Younger generations are increasingly refusing to enter this high-pressure labor market simply to service a 40-year mortgage. They openly reject the social expectation that owning a home is the ultimate validation of personal worth and maturity. This mindset represents a major generational rift, choosing personal freedom over lifelong debt and property obligations. In major commercial hubs, a growing segment of young professionals are opting for long-term renting, despite the deep cultural stigma attached to it. Renting allows young workers to maintain mobility, live closer to job opportunities, and avoid urban down payments. The government has responded by expanding institutional rental platforms and enforcing tenant protections to legitimize renting. This gradual shift is slowly decoupling personal dignity and urban belongings from absolute property title, where housing identity retains its biggest and deepest value is an access key to public services and top-tier educational infrastructure. Under the local household registration system, owning an apartment in a specific school district guarantees a child's public school placement. Parents often buy tiny, aging apartments in prime districts at astronomical prices purely to secure that educational spot for their child. In this context, home ownership is less about living space and more about purchasing social mobility for the next generation. The financial collapse of major property developers exposed severe vulnerabilities in the pre-sale home buying model. In China, a vast majority of new homes were sold off plan before construction was finished, with buyers paying full mortgages immediately. Then, when developers faced liquidity crisis and halted projects, buyers were left paying mortgages on unfinished, unlivable apartments. This crisis shattered the long-standing public belief that real estate was a completely risk-free asset. Internal migrant workers experience a unique form of housing exclusion where ownership in their hometowns does not translate to urban integration. Millions of rural migrants own homes in their home villages but live in crowded rented rooms in cities where they work. Their property ownership exists in places where there are few economic opportunities while they remain disenfranchised renters in urban centers. This highlights how a high national ownership percentage can hide profound regional and class disparities. The property market downturn has triggered a noticeable shift in intergenerational power dynamics within families. Parents who push their adult children to buy property at the peak of the market watch asset values correct. Younger family members who resisted buying are increasingly questioning traditional financial advice from older generations. This economic correction is weakening the unquestioned authority of elders in family financial decision-making. Demographic shifts, including population decline and falling birth rates, are eroding the long-term demand foundation for housing. Decades of the one-child policy mean that many young couples stand to inherit multiple apartments from both sides of their families. This upcoming generational wealth transfer will leave fewer buyers in the market and create a surplus of inherited housing stock. The historical scarcity that drove panicked homebuyers is rapidly giving way to structural oversupply in secondary markets. State interventions aimed at stabilizing the housing market reflect a delicate balance between curbing speculation and preventing economic panic. Modern high-rise residential complexes offer secure and modern amenities, but often lack the tight-knit social bonds of traditional courtyard neighborhoods. Neighbors in massive apartment towers frequently live side by side for years without forming meaningful social relationships. Physical property ownership has increased, but traditional neighborhood-based social fabric has grown more isolated. In small, lower-tier cities, property values have faced steep downward pressure, leaving many homeowners trapped in depreciating assets. Speculators who bought multiple apartments in third and fourth tier cities during the boom years are struggling to find buyers or tenants. These empty developments highlight a stark difference between high demand tier 1 megacities and shrinking regional towns. It proves that homeownership alone does not guarantee financial security if the local economy lacks job growth. For 20 years, the public believed that real estate prices would only ever go up, driving speculative fever across all income levels. As the market cools, families are forced to recalibrate their expectations and view housing as a living space rather than a wealth generator. This cultural shift is reshaping the broader economic identity of the modern middle class. Ultimately, China's 90% home ownership rate is maintained by historical privatization, intergenerational capital pooling, and deep social norms. Where it is lost is in the absence of freehold land title, the staggering financial pressure on young workers, and the concentration of wealth in an illiquid market. The high ownership stats is not just a sign of economic achievement, it's a complex social contract currently undergoing its most significant historical transformation.